Majin Senpai here with my first actual YouTube video. This video is some of the type of content that I've been wanting to make for a while now, which I'm sure by looking at the title of this video, you can gauge what kind of video it's going to be. But if you can't, essentially what it is, it's going to be the sort of scale for the video game character Chai and his crew from Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush is a rhythm-based hack and slash like other popular game series, Devil May Cry, with a twist of Guitar Hero. We'll be going over the crew's feats and accomplishments through their journey to see where we can properly scale these characters, starting with the main character, Chai. Chai is a bit of a wild card, as Korsuke puts it best. He may not be slick, but you get it done. With him being a very unorthodox type of fighter, making most of what he does up on the fly. With him being such a gifted fighter, he usually just blacks out and comes to, knowing how to use his powers with almost full mastery. It's actually wild. But we'll go over his displays of durability and strength as they go hand in hand, starting out with some of his more simple feats. We see that he's able to no-sell a giant robot hand punching him through pure concrete, and he gives up as if nothing happens. And he's able to physically outbox robots who were earlier, sending him through multiple walls, one-shotting him. Granting him on his lower end feats wall to possibly building level, which is on the lower end of Chai's feats. But as we see later in the game, in the fight against Zanzo's unfinished giant robot, the one I mentioned earlier, Chai and his crew, aside from Cinnamon, the weakest in the crew, are able to no-sell the explosion that expands across a large part of Vandalay. This is important for Chai's scaling because early in the game, Chai speculates that where the game takes place, Vandalay campus is more like a city. And Peppermint, the daughter of the original CEO, Roxanne Vandalay, and brother to the current CEO, only doubles down on the claim, saying Vandalay likes to show off. But I'm looking for what they're hiding, kind of saying it has even more depth. Also later in the game, you can even see Vandalay next to a large mountain range, seeming larger or at least relative to its size. And Chai and his crew, they both all take 0 damage aside from, said weakest, or Cinnamon. And not only did the explosion take up a large portion of Vandalay, we never really see its entire effective range. So it got so large so quickly that the screen and the surrounding areas are engulfed in a flash of light. So it may have been much further than we could have seen. Chai scales to this robot because in its description, this version is completely disregarded in favor of Zanzo's completed version, stating, had Zanzo completed it, it probably would have beaten Chai, implying that this one was sort of essentially an act of desperation, to be quite frank. And this being said, each and every one of Chai's crew members is seen damaging it or slowing it down, although Peppermint doesn't do any lasting damage, but she's more so the brains anyway. But at least she tanks the explosion. But Macaroon, Korsuke, and Chai are all seen doing heavy damage or stopping it quite casually, possibly meaning if it came down to it, they may have all been able to solo it. And before we move on to speed, I want to mention a quick bit of highball that I like to leave up to your interpretations. The best unit are the more of the mid-tier in the game, and they're said to be able to prevent the world's risk, giving examples from literal meteors to out-of-control kites. So that can mean nukes like the Tsar Bomb or world-ending meteors. And Chai pretty casually destroys these same bots. Although this could be an exaggeration on the part of Vandalay, it could be argued that it isn't, as the people at Vandalay are extremely proud of their work and aren't likely to lie about its capabilities. But as I said, I'll leave that to your interpretations. As we move on to Chai's speed, which is surprisingly a lot more simple to nail down, in the game we'll run into the GNR-20s, whose lamp is directly stated to be shining light, stated to use its unbelievably bright light that's composed of 7 billion lumens against its enemies, in which Chai commonly fights and consistently reacts to the beam, sometimes twice and within a short instance. And even with that being said, there are plenty of enemies that are said to use lasers, with the definition of laser being an intense beam of coherent monochromatic light. But I don't really think I have to be arguing his relativity to light, or at least being light speed, but how much faster he could possibly be. With most of the enemies that are equipped with these versions of lasers and beams that, like that damn bird, but most importantly for scaling would be the HGOM, or whatever it's called, being stated to have rapid fire capability, with it being able to shoot many lasers with the word rapid meaning happening in a short time or at a fast pace. So lasers at a fast pace, Have the communal model having an attack called Plasma Roar, shooting multiple lasers within a short succession. And Chai quite casually reacts to these light attacks, but not only are his reaction speeds light speed, He can at least move relative to light, being able to physically dodge these beams or outright beating light to its locations, with one example being how he beat another robot's laser headed towards Corsica. Although it's not like he was miles away, he did end up reaching her first before the light, and everything seemed to slow down in the wake. Or how the time he dodged 3 lasers coming at him at once. So raw movement speed is at least relative to light. Whether you believe that's in his short burst, like when he uses his rhythm dashes or not, the feats are there. Chai's hacks are busted, with them being dubbed as stupid musical powers. So I'll go down the list and give a brief description of a few of them, like his rhythm dodge. With Chai is able to move on the beat of his MP3 player heart, no joke, linking his movements into 3 burst dashes, with this being his quote-unquote fastest movement option. Then we have his magnetism. This gives Chai the ability to track metal, although I doubt it's on some planetary scale. He is able to use the metal from his surroundings to amp his attacks, and he can be like a metal Spider-Man with his magnet arm, although we never really see the full scale of his magnetic control. Following that, we have electricity manipulation. With this, he's essentially anti-lightning and electricity to an extent, although we never really see to the full extent. But this allows him to absorb electricity and powers him up, so he can repower electric-based things with his energy, and he's able to funnel electric currents into himself, further powering up his arm, amping him further. And he's able to convert this electricity into reverb energy, which allows him to use his stronger attacks. Then we have his main hacks, sound manipulation. With this being said, the world dances around him to his beat to certain extents, and he's able to catch the beat of anything by basically putting the beat to his beat to the surroundings, giving him a sort of precognition, as he's able to hear and see the rhythm of his opponent's attacks and movements. He also has the ability to cancel out anything sound-based by finding the rhythm within himself to cancel it out, being able to destroy sound-based barriers and attacks. And finally, we have his rhythm jumps. As long as he catches his own beat, he can jump as high as he wants. It can be as much to 4 times, but we never really see the full limit, so can't really say where it stops. But let's talk about his crew for a bit. In order of introduction, what we'll do to save time is briefly go over where they scale and some of their abilities, starting with Peppermint. She's able to foderize the weaker robots and tank that explosion that I mentioned earlier, but couldn't really do any lasting damage to Zanzo's bot. With it being pretty safe to say, she's not as strong as the rest of her squad, with her using twin blasters and a massive cannon that can both stun enemies with some form of electricity. She's also the smartest of the team, with her creating 808, who's a pretty sentient robot, said to have taken a life of her own. She Chai's battle item and gives him beat hit mastery, which basically allows him to double his damage by landing attacks on his beat. Then, moving on to Macaroon, who's not only a super genius, the guy is easily able to hold that huge robot in place with his bare hands, and toss huge cement pillars and send metal chunks flying with a single punch. As well as to tank that explosion that I mentioned, with no damage, he probably could have beaten that robot in a one-on-one if he wasn't such a pacifist, with him being easily the physically strongest and top 2 in the squad. Probably top 2, I should say. Macaroon has gravity manipulation, but we never really see the full extent of the ability. But he can at least halt almost anything and everything the team runs across. Then we have Macaroon's creation, Cinnamon, the GOAT, although he's fodder and doesn't really do much. And last but not least is definitely Corsica, aka Best Girl, who scales the most consistently to Chai, as she basically blitzes and one-shots an earlier version of Chai, albeit he was sort of off guard. This doesn't really matter because he's able to stay standing in Macaroon's gravity well, but her winds are strong enough to knock him clear off his feet. She's incredibly strong, casually shitting on Zanzo's robot, setting up her squad to ultimately win. She's able to casually throw a huge cargo container as well without the use of her ability, wind manipulation. Able to make huge tornadoes and big gusts of winds, staggering most if not every enemy they come across. But in the end, I'd say the weakest to strongest would be Cinnamon, 808, Peppermint, Macaroon because of his pacifist nature, Corsica, then ultimately the GOAT Chai, with them all being between city to city block range, with them all falling somewhere within those FTL speeds, although they could be much faster and much stronger depending on your interpretation. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this sheds some light on a new verse to bring into some debates. Like, let's throw Chai and his friends in verses like Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, or even My Hero to see where they stop or if they stop at all. And we can cover those here. But as I said, this is my first actual type of YouTube video, as I mentioned in the beginning, with this being my first not edited down from my Twitch streams and just going straight to YouTube. That being mentioned, my Twitch links, my editors, and my channel artist links will all be in the description. And yeah, I should be dropping a channel trailer sometime soon as well. And hopefully, with time, I'll be able to remake this video at a much higher quality. As always, thank you so much for watching. Peace.